Hi, I'm Shan Wu with a undercolor of law analysis of one of the daily TRO cases involving DOGE and Trump. This one is the American Federation of Teachers case. And I want to talk about this one. I did a morning hit on it on CNN the other day. It was actually a morning hit about just how many cases there are and trying to make some rhyme or reason out of it. And I picked this one as an example because it really is a classic TRO against DOGE, which is it covers Privacy Act violations and the Administrative Procedure Act violations. Recall Administrative Procedure Act, the APA, we're going to hear an awful lot about that in the next 4 years, is the law that governs how agencies actually implement their rules. There's a whole process for it. They have to propose the rule. There's a commentary period, go back and forth on it before it actually becomes the administrative rule in the case. The reason we're going to hear a lot about that is obviously the Musk regime is not doing any of that, right? They're just like using these executive orders to do things without going through any of that process in the APA. That's why we're going to hear a lot about it. That's why that's a very common theme for all of these lawsuits against DOGE's efforts here. Now, the gravest danger in this one, and what they were suing about, we'll talk about, is really it's the exposure of all the personal information, and as well as the process of DOGE rather brainlessly just feeding all that information into some AI. And you can read between the lines as to what it is that Musk is doing when he's asking the people, including the FBI, to talk about, hey, what are you guys working on? They're just trying to find more and more engagement information to feed into the artificial intelligence, the reasons for which will benefit him. We'll talk about that in a moment. This particular lawsuit, the judge granted a TRO stopping that aspect of the case. And one reason that judge focuses on here is the irreparable harm. And the case is basically frozen until March 10th. What happens after that? Likely a more expansive hearing and in the form of a hearing on a preliminary injunction, PI. And remember, the purpose of these TROs, temporary restraining orders, are temporary, meant to be a short-term protective action to freeze the situation, to prevent any potential harm from happening. But the legal standard for the preliminary injunction, which is a more permanent, not permanent, but longer lasting one, the TROs are very short-lived, that uses the same legal standard. And the most important part of that standard that we are seeing play out in these TROs, and we'll see them also played out in the preliminary injunctions, is whether or not there's irreparable harm here. And the difference is that with the PI, the parties have more time to develop the case, to give better arguments to judges, and possibly to present some more evidence. The pace of the TROs, though, is so fast that some are overlapping others, some are lapping them all together. And here in the teacher's case, initially, it also included seeking relief against the Treasury Department and its secretary, Scott Bessent. But the court declined to grant it because a different court had already imposed the TRO on Treasury. Now, if you want to have some fun here, we'll put up the order and a link to it. You want to look at footnote 1. Whenever you want to have fun and opinion, check out the footnotes. That's a real nerdy lawyer thing to do. What's great about this footnote is it kind of gives a little summary of all the pending cases, all the TROs, how they're turning out so far. Some have been granted, some haven't been granted. Again, you can also go to Just Security and look for their tracking system. They're working on that, but it's a really good one place to look for the status of all these different cases. And you'll see that in some of them, the TRO did not get granted because the plaintiffs could not actually prove to the court satisfaction the irreparable harm. And I've said before, that's a little bit troubling because these enormous consequences for so many people, it's going to be a little bit haphazard. One judge's idea of irreparable harm will not necessarily be the other judge's idea of it. So you're going to see some patchwork type decisions going on in the country. Now, the one that lapped this TRO against Treasury and made it moot for this judge was the one filed by 19 state attorney generals. And we've discussed that In the past, that's important because you're going to want to keep an eye on the state AGs. They're really kind of leading the charge here, as opposed to DOJ, which obviously is going to be in the other camp on all these. The summary of this TRO is that it prevents the Education Department from disclosing personally identifiable information to any DOGE affiliates. Side note, I mean, DOGE affiliate, we don't even know what DOGE is, much less who their affiliates are. That's a huge problem. It also prevents OPM, which is the Office of Personnel Management, keeps track of all the employee type information, managing the personnel for the government, prevents them from disclosing personally identifiable information to any OPM employee working principally on the DOGE agenda, whatever that is, with one exception, which is the OPM Chief Information Officer. And then it denies the plaintiff's request for relief against Treasury for the reasons we talked about, because Treasury is already a subject to a TRO. Now, the American Federation of Teachers Union put out this really great summary. We'll put the link up there if you want to read more about it. And I'm going to quote from that, which is, they say that today the court agreed with our claim that DOGE affiliates do not need to access Americans' highly sensitive and private data to do their jobs. It's an important one because it's protecting American citizens' information, because there's no adequate safeguards in place for it. And what the judge wrote that they quote from is that none of these workplace reform measures, because remember, that's what DOGE is supposedly trying to do, right? Root out fraud, improve efficiency, allegedly contemplated by the executive orders covering DOGE, none of them appears to require OPM and Department of Education employees to access records with the sensitive personal information of current and former federal employees. And, she writes, the government never explains why OPM and Department of Education personnel needs this access to implement workplace reform measures. Now, it's hard to say ultimately where the strongest arguments are going to be. The TRO is a very early stage. We'll get a better sense of it as some of the preliminary injunctions play out, and the one in this case plays out. The example, though, of the mass dismissals in this fork in the road, the judge points out that's very distressing to workers. And I've pointed out before, it's going to lead to a massive onslaught of class actions, individual claims from a legal standpoint. The administration may spend so much time dealing with the fallout just from that issue that, frankly, they'll have little bandwidth to do much else. I mean, certainly if you look at DOJ, holding aside they're paring down how many people they have too, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see if they're doing anything else besides defending the firings of people and opening investigations into the critics of the Trump administration. Right now, looking from the outside, it's hard to figure out what other kind of enforcement actions that they're doing. So this type of chaos in some ways is good because it's slowing down the enormous harm that these executive orders do. But here's the real downside. That harm has already occurred. It's still ongoing. And the harm that already occurred on the personal information aspect, it's already been exposed. And it may have already been copied. Some of it was already fed into AI, artificial intelligence. And why was it fed into AI? And it's part of their mandate to find efficiency or root out fraud. I mean, I'm no AI expert, but you can imagine these simpleton kind of requests being made, feeding in this enormous amount of data into the AI. The request is the equivalent of like find, waste, and fraud. I mean, how accurate is that going to be? Is that really actually doing anything to specifically give guidance where to look? In order to even begin that task, right, the artificial intelligence is gathering all this information, which Musk will have access to for his personal use in his companies. This is data mining on a massive government okayed level, not even for the government, which is a problem. It's for the benefit of a private entity, and a private entity whose culture and leader is one who relishes in making mistakes. There's no security that's good on this system. It's already been hacked. Their own website's been hacked. It kind of reminds you of the beta testing of the Tesla automated driving systems. It's beta testing, but human beings are in the cars, right? Same type of problem here. Musk famously, in some press conference recently, maybe it was a cabinet meeting where he is actually leading the cabinet meeting. He's talking about how, yeah, we're going to make mistakes, but we'll correct them quickly. The example he used was, oh yeah, when we were cutting the aid, foreign aid in AID, we accidentally cut out the funding for the people who prevent and keep track of the Ebola virus. So we all want that to be back in, so we put that back in place. As has been widely reported, first of all, the whole structure for the Ebola prevention is not back in place. But his attitude, and presumably DOGE's attitude towards it, is, oh yeah, that was just a mistake over a deadly virus that people will die from, and that it takes time and constant effort to keep that structure in place. So this kind of notion like, oh, we'll just make a little mistake, we'll correct it, is exactly the kind of irreparable harm that's happening. And think about I think now the count is like 1 million emails that were sent out demanding government workers to list the last 5 things they've been working on, and otherwise go back and forth on this, they'll be fired, or Musk says, we'll take your refusal to answer as a resignation. Okay, first of all, laughably, this includes a demand of, FBI agents, probably national security people too. I mean, what are they supposed to write about the last 5 things they've been doing? The last confidential informants I've been working with. But at an even more laughable level it's like an incredibly dumb idea of a productivity exercise to see what you've been working on. It's meaningless. What's really behind that, we can think about. How are you going to generate 1 million emails and actually analyze them and respond to them? I mean, maybe you could hit send and, it just replicates millions of emails, but the responses you get, presumably they're trying to look at them and decipher them and see if it's efficient or not. No one's going to be able to do that. They're feeding it into AI to help them with that. And if pressed, if, for example, Congress were to press them on that, since no one else is going to ask the questions, or if we press them on that, that'd be a good thing to do. They're going to admit to that because they like the idea of using AI. When you feed all that engagement in, it adds to this enormous data breach. That's what some experts have called it. And we're going to cover that more and maybe talk to some people who really understand the dangers behind this. But it's the largest theft of data in history, and it's an ongoing one. That's where the harm is. And we're going to see if these court cases can keep pushing that point, get to that, and make it plain to all of us so we can shine sunlight on it. All right, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Keep those replies and comments coming. Particularly interested in what sorts of topics will be good for you to hear more about. And we'll talk to you soon.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.